There's so much in this Mary and Elizabeth text, but I am going to stay true to my commitment of 5, no more than 7, hopefully 5 minutes, because I made a promise and I want to stick to it. But it makes me think about friendship. I am a complicated friend to have. You already know that I'm administratively challenged, and that does not just mean at church. Your text may go into the sea of forgetfulness. I may forget certain things and over remember other things. My neurodivergence makes it an act of love to be my friend. Um, but the more I learn, the more I grow, the more I utilize my awesome therapeutic and coaches and services, I am able to communicate things in ways that kind of let people know what they're getting before they get it and before they're kind of trapped into the wonderful world of friendship with me. But the thing I think about is I imagine Mary, this young girl, hears from an angel and has to tell somebody. But then how do you say it? Like, how do you articulate this great mystery? Who do you seek out to hold space for joy, fear, questions, concerns, meditations, musings, while dealing with such a big situation? In the text, after receiving this big news from the angel, Mary chooses not to linger in isolation. Instead, the text says she goes with haste to Elizabeth. She does not post about it. She don't pack a big old bag. She don't make arrangements for the cat. She is out of there. I hope we all have that person. Or that, and if you don't, my prayer is that God will bless you to see that person. The person that when something happens and you can't hold it alone, whether it's a gift or a challenge, you know who to run to. Elizabeth, in the midst of all this, was not just sitting on her laurels at the spa. She had her own stuff going on. A child in her, I wrote old age here, and I thought about it when I wrote. I was like, man, Shana, that seems thing. A child in her well-seasoned age. A future that was once improbable, now growing within her. These two women, one young and brimming with the uncertainty of what's to come, the other more seasoned, stepping into a promise that has been delayed, find themselves standing on the threshold of change, a threshold of possibility. They're standing in a space in between. When they hug, that embrace is not just, hello, how you doing, how you been? It is holy. It is a confirmation of, look at what is happening to us. The story does more, though. It reminds us that we're not meant, nor do we come here, to walk this world alone. When life places us in these seasons of waiting, it's easy to want to go inward, to let the weight of uncertainty rest like a mantle on our already heavy shoulders. But Mary and Elizabeth show us a different way. They show us the power of showing up. Their relationships becomes a sanctuary, a space of mutual care, understanding. We all need this. Companions who see us clearly, speak life into our weary spirits, and remind us of the promises that we're having a hard time believing for ourselves. These relationships are grounded in honesty, grace, and love, and that's the place where God's work often takes root. In the Women's Lectionary, Year W, Dr. Gaffney talks about relationship and kinship. In a transgenerational reading, all who produce and nurture children participate in God's work in the world and are recipients of the promise of God's care. While the text and traditional interpretations of this privilege some children, characters, and lineages above others, God's promise to Hagar from last week, her son and their descendants, is an act of fidelity that transcends deeply rooted regional and ethical conflicts. No matter how fractured relationships are, they remain bound together as kin. To this world of fractured and unreconciled people, God sends a holy child as the embodiment of reconciliation. This singular, extraordinary child is sent to a family, Mary and Joseph, an extended family, Elizabeth and Zechariah, a series of communities, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Capernaum, and more, a people, Israel, and all peoples, Gentile and Jew, representing the fullness of humanity. As Advent readings, these texts call us to attend to our place in these lineages, this family, this community, this people, and prepare for the return of this holy child who will complete the work of reconciliation and restoration. This text invites us to ask, who are our Elizabeths? Who are people we can run to with haste when life feels overwhelming? And who might need us to be their Elizabeth? Because we all can't always be Mary. It's like Monopoly. You always don't get to be the dog. Like, you have to be willing to be the other pieces too. The thing I love about community is that it holds a mirror up to who we are and reminds us of the truth of things we may no longer see on our own. When Mary arrives at Elizabeth's house, she doesn't just bring herself. She brings the fullness of her story, the weight of the words, and the promise that she's now carrying. Elizabeth didn't dismiss her or question her or let her shy away. She reflected back to Mary who she was. In our own lives, we need spaces where others hold up that mirror, not in critique, not in judgment, but to lovingly remind us of the image of God that we were created in. We need people who can call out our gifts and our foolishness. We need people that will encourage us to keep going and let us know when it's time to stop. We need people to remind us of the divine possibilities unfolding in our lives. And we have to be those people that mirror that back as well. Being grounded in our faith, it carries with it a responsibility to partner with God in the healing work of this world. While studying, I saw this question in an Unfleshed liturgy from like 2021. And it said, is our church or other communities where we do faith work the kind of place Mary could have run to? Or is it the kind of place she was running from? Do we nurture, uplift, and hold space? Or do we stifle and dismiss? I believe we are the former. Community is the place where we see ourselves more clearly, where we learn to believe again in the promises of God, and where our stories find strength in the hands and hearts and company of others. We have to do the work to build and nurture those in-between spaces, spaces where we both can be held and when we can hold others in this mirror of love and grace. Because it is in those holy hamlets that we are reminded that God is present and that we are never alone. Here is to community.
I'm excited to read 5 very short stories, but now I'm going to first tell you one first that happened to me yesterday after I wrote these. I was with a group of friends on an annual Christmas shopping trip at Leaker's grocery store in Park City. It's our first stop every time. Our joy or our enthusiasm was obviously palatable. So we're standing in an aisle. I turned around and make just like intense, immediate eye contact with a well-seasoned woman who was well into her 80s, probably 90, who looked at me with complete recognition, we don't know each other, of enthusiasm, and grabs my shoulders, and we do the fullest, biggest embrace. And I make some comment of, we don't get out much. I mean, it's 9 a.m., it's early, and whatever. And we're hugging, and she said, oh, but I can tell it's fun, and you're at my grocery store, and that was it. I leave and go back to my friends, and they say, who was it? I was like, I have no idea. it reminded me, and it's reflected in these stories I'm about to read, but I didn't consciously realize that when I think of community, it's 50-50 complete strangers and people I know. It might be more strangers meeting, and it'll make sense, but I realized, for me, being in community means communing with the strangers that I see, and oftentimes most of the people I see are, well, you'll see. I'll tell more about it, but think about that, and here we go. On one extreme, I'm fiercely independent, and I don't need anybody, and I can do everything on my own. And on the other extreme is a desperate desire and need to be cared for and chosen. And while yes, in most of life, the truth is somewhere in the middle, I am also claiming the truth at both extremes. First story is, we used to have it all. My Oma, my grandmother, my dad's mom, was at a restaurant. Oh, by the way, this story might not be accurate. It's how I remember it, and that's what stories are. The heading is already accurate. Yeah, well, that's the important part. So, my Oma was at a restaurant that had a little metal holder of all the different jams and honey, maybe peanut butter, and if we're in Canada, Cheese Whiz. My Oma, Opa, and parents had been seated but hadn't ordered yet when a server took that metal holder of spreadables to another table. When my Oma had ordered something that would need those spreadable products, the server asked, well, what kind would she want? And my Oma said the phrase that has been repeated and borrowed many times over, well, we used to have it all. That's where I'm at with community and needing each other. I want it all. I want to lean into the part of me that wants and loves to be cared for and helped and surrounded. And I want to lean into the part of me that knows I'm capable of taking care of myself and offering others support. I love living in, and this little 6-word is a phrase I've made one with dashes between. Hypervigilance turned curious awareness of others. And from that lens, I have 4 more short stories. The Black Disciples, Babies on the Plane, Hands Across America, and Divine Hens. The Black Disciples. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, graffiti was familiar and a sign of disrespect and trouble. I remember in my body how I felt when I approached the cinder block wall, which happened to be only a few blocks from our church, and I saw new writing in huge letters, Black Disciples. When I tell you that I felt like I had just been let in on a good news secret, all capitalized, I felt good. We were safe. The same gangs that determined our dress code, no clothes of certain colors could be worn, stars on our Converse shoes had to be removed, we were now claiming Jesus, and they would fit right in at our church. I had learned about disciples, and now our city had them. I don't know how many years later I learned that the Black Disciples are actually a Chicago-based street gang who cause a lot of violence and trouble. Babies on a plane. When I was young and in crowded spaces with strangers, which was often growing up in an urban setting with our life infused with a lot of travel, I would look for babies. Small toddlers, these babies, infants, were a glimmer of safety. I realized I had in my mind a belief that if there were babies and children, then there were obviously caregivers too. And furthermore, surely the adults not attached to these babies would be decent with them present. I swelled with joy and safety when there would be a baby in the same restaurant or on the airplane because I believed in an unwritten and unspoken commitment to gentle, playful peace because they were present. Hands Across America. When I was 12 years old and about to move to Kansas, I was part of something as big as our nation. I was part of Hands Across America. I got the t-shirt. I was driven to some random location on the south side of Chicago, and I held hands with a friend on one side and one of their cousins on the other, who I wished was cute, and that could have been like a cute Hands Across America romance thing, but he was not cute to me. So I just remember that. We held hands, and at that moment, I was part of a chain that was reaching across the nation. But here's the thing. I have no idea all these years later if Hands Across America was successful. I had to look up to remember what it was about. Was it a hoax? And none of that mattered. And none of it matters even still, because in that moment, I was part of something that felt neutral, low stakes, a mysterious camaraderie that I could only see a fraction of. Okay, my last story is Divine Hens. I had a friend in high school who had 2 older sisters. As many know, I don't have any sisters. I have a brother who's younger than me. I was with them on some outdoor family event and watched my friend, the youngest of the 3 sisters, act out being upset about something, and I have no memory of what it was. But it was something that deeply upset her, but not her sisters, so they had the capacity to rush towards her in a way that I had never witnessed before. They surrounded her, stroked her face, said her name over and over, moved their faces so that they could make eye contact with her. And I know they didn't really, but I feel like they kicked their legs a little, like in the grainy dirt, and they clucked and pecked at her pain, crooning with intent and attention, like divine hens.